there were flashers. Do you remember flashers?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I do remember flashers.
Yeah.
It was a thing, right?
It was a thing. It was totally a thing where people were, men would be in public or like in these back alleys, kind of just exposing themselves or jumping out of bushes, exposing themselves to children and young women. Absolutely. That happened to me.
Yes.
The funny thing is that as women and young girls, you live with this and it becomes to some degree expected and almost normalized. Like, this can happen to you. What?
Yeah.
And it's just a thing that you have to be aware of. It's an extra thing you have to be aware of. Right? Welcome to the Womanhood Lectures, where we bring you topics on issues that matter to you, the modern day woman. I'm one of your hosts, Yasmin.
And I'm Lyra. Please like and share. We are on Rumble, YouTube, as well as Spotify. You can listen to our podcast version. When you do comment and when you do like and subscribe, it actually helps us pick up more subscribers along the way and share our content. Yeah. So today is actually a pretty
it's a little bit of a heavy topic
serious
today.
topic.
Yeah. But you know what? I think it's really important for us to talk about. And there's definitely things that I think people can have some good takeaways. It's not just going to be all doom and gloom. But we are going to be talking about fear today, the kind of fear that women live with on a day-to-day basis. And it's really something to, a lot of women will certainly identify and understand what we're talking about. But it's really also to help men kind of understand what is it that women live with from our perspective. And it's not to be victimized. It's not for us to be saying, poor me, woe is me. It's really so that people can have a better understanding of what our lived experience is like as women. And then be able to for everyone to be able to understand and then come together and think of ways to support us a little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why when we see online that, most women are looking for men who are protectors, providers, yada, yada. One of the reasons why we are looking for a man who can protect us is, there is a part of us that is always living in a state of worry. It's not necessarily, that something's going to happen to you on a regular basis. But for me, being in my 40s, I can tell you that there's been several occurrences that have happened to me out there in the world where I worry for my daughters too. I worry about how their experiences will be, and I'm hoping and praying that they don't experience those things. So one question that I kind of threw out when preparing this podcast was, could you ever imagine as a woman being told to marry the man who to you?
Ugh.
I know it's such and I know, Yasmin, you're such a beautiful soul. You don't like to really delve into things like this,
squeamish.
right?
It just hits me so hard when I think about that.
But the reason why this came up in my topic with you, and I threw it out as a topic, and why I wanted to address it is because I watched a documentary that was on Netflix. It was To Kill a Tiger.
Yep.
What was interesting about it was, and why it really touched me, was because it was from my country. So it's from India. And in India, I mean, there are so many reported cases of, there are so many that go unreported, but literally every 20 minutes a woman is.
That's a crazy stat.
It's really, really high.
I think people really need to let that sink in. Yeah.
Now, the story is about a young girl who's 13 who gets by 3 boys in her village. She's 13 years old. And the solution for the village and what they threw out at her and the family was that she should marry one of them. And
so culturally, why is that? Because I know the answer, but I really love for people to understand what the culture is,
right?
What society is like there, and why would someone ever think of suggesting something like that?
Right. So women in general are not seen as being the same level as men. That's very common in our culture. But when you get, you take on that shame. Your family takes on the shame. The man did not take on the shame. The family took on the shame. The daughter took on the shame. Yep. She lives in that village. She's not going anywhere. It's not like she can ever really move away from this story that has become her life. Yeah. So that's why the solution would be to marry this boy, because no one else will.
And right? the other part of that is this now defines you.
Defines
this
who you
literally
are.
Defines
yes.
who you are, what you're allowed to, not really allowed, but sort of like what opportunities and options are available to you now as a woman.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
As a girl. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that whole storyline, I did watch the entire thing. But a lot of it was very satisfying to know that they've got 25 years in prison for this. But really it's the beginning of a new way of thinking there. So this needed to happen because that was the first time that it was recognized that way. And it makes other people aware that this is a common thing and it's wrong. You know what I mean? Sexual assault, sexual abuse is wrong. So that being said, I mean, we touch on that as being, this is another side of the world, but now you come over here to Canada, to the Western world, and it's not as prevalent, but
it's still very high.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's it's about a 30% rate.
Yes.
30% of women have been sexually assaulted in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
I think the stat was from Stats Canada, and that's all women over the age of 15.
Right.
15.
Yes. Well, when I
Crazy.
did look at Stats Canada, we found that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 8 boys have been sexually abused by the time they're 18. So it is a pretty high number. And since 2022, those numbers have increased. So we're seeing it change exponentially. So that being a very important topic. I think it's a very important topic now. Have you ever experienced anything that was kind of like a little...
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, okay, so let's take it back to when we were teenagers, right? So in the 90s,
yes,
you've probably experienced this. There were flashers. Do you remember
yes.
flashers?
Yes.
Oh my
I
gosh.
do remember flashers.
Yeah.
It was a thing, right?
It was a thing. It was totally a thing where people were, men would be in public or like in these back alleys, kind of just exposing themselves or jumping out of bushes, exposing themselves to children and
Right.
young women. Absolutely. That happened to me.
Yes.
The funny thing is that as women and young girls, you live with this and it becomes to some degree expected and almost normalized. Like, this can happen to you. What?
Yeah.
And it's just a thing that you have to be aware of. It's an extra thing you have to be aware of. Right.
Right.
So flashes were a thing. Been flashed. I've been absolutely groped on a bus.
transit?
Yeah, public transit, 100%.
Yeah.
I've been, I would say, pretty close to like physically somewhat assaulted, like kind of like groped, pushed around, like a guy really coming heavily onto me that I knew that I was sort of just getting to know. So it's like one of those things where you're 16, you're on a bus, you're traveling somewhere and you're going on sort of like a date, which is really just being outside somewhere, going to a movie or whatever, right? Someone that I had met at an all ages party. Did you ever go to all ages parties?
I didn't. I wasn't allowed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went to an all ages night, met a guy there, just gave him my phone number. And then we met somewhere. We were out in public. It didn't seem like anything at the time. I had brought a friend with me, luckily, to meet up with us as well, because he was a total gentleman. He was great when we were all hanging out together. And then on the way home, that's when he came on to me. And he was gropey and really, really pushy. And he started getting he started saying mean things. He started, kind of making fun of me. And I was just like, what just happened here?
Right.
And my friend didn't know what to do, right? She was a year younger than me. And she was just kind of standing there frozen, which is very common, right? Like if something like that happens to you and we're in a public place and I'm thinking, oh my God, like no one is saying anything. And this guy is like pushing me around. So I literally had to push him off me, like shove him into a seat. And I'm not bigger than him. And kind of tell him off. And that was, for me to do that it was really scary. And then luckily, and then I just went to sit with my friend at the back of the bus, and he's sitting there and he's kind of giving me the evil eye and the evil stare, but there's people around. No one said anything. No one did anything. No one stepped in. Like it was it's really sad, right?
It's very sad.
Yeah. And then, so I just sat there. I was kind of shaking. I stayed with my friend. He got off the bus. I can't remember, like a few stops or at some stop before us. And I just stayed on, like I just stayed on long. I was just like, I can't be anywhere. I can't even be within blocks of wherever this guy is. And then after that, I can't remember if he tried to call me again, but that was the end of that. And so, I mean, I've had a real, like, I mean, there's definitely women who've experienced much worse, but that was my first experience. And that was when I was about 15.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's very young, right?
Yeah.
Like I went to
an
an all-girls school, so we were always told to be careful, right? Because there were men who would have like video cameras, you know, kind of as they were walking, and just being able to shoot video up our skirts.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, but I've seen definitely a lot of male body parts before I was, you know, of age, and a lot of it was those flashers or those guys that were just trying to get a reaction out of you.
Yeah.
And I think about my daughters today, and I said, I don't even think I've had this conversation with them, you know, but because they're so protected and so shielded from this, but it was such a thing when we were younger.
Yeah.
That it kind of violates you. You're just like violated.
Yeah.
That violate.
Absolutely.
Like, and then you're afraid. You're afraid of what that means. And you're thinking to yourself, like, did I cause this? Is this something that's normal? Like just, you know, the groping on the bus. Like I used to run to try to grab a seat if I saw like somebody doing it. And I've watched it happen. And I've tried to complain and try to say things, but you know, like they didn't care at that point in time. So it almost feels like we as women kind of get pushed aside.
Well, we don't, you know, if you can't protect yourself, you kind of hope that someone else
will protect you. Yeah.
And then when they don't, you realize you really are all alone. And it's a scary thought, right? And it's a very difficult experience to go through. But I do think that that's, you know, it's kind of, I feel like it's been baked into our female collective, right? That this is a risk. It's like anything in life where there are certain things that as a human collective, you know, once, you know, whatever, millions of years ago, we were going to be at the mercy of, say, animals like, you know, the saber-toothed tiger. So we've developed these responses, these fear responses, right? Freeze, flight, fight, whatever it might be. But I feel like in the female collective, we've sort of adopted this low level of anxiety and fear, and always being aware, because there's been perpetration on women from men. And this is not to say all men are awful or whatever. This is just something that's a fact that's happened over time.
Right.
And it's been baked into many of our cultures, where it's become acceptable because maybe it was just so prevalent at one point that it was just something to expect or not bat an eyelash about. And so women have really just had to deal with the aftermath and learn how to work around it. Right.
Yeah. In our culture, you know, unfortunately, you know, it's taken this long for something like this to come to, you know, the highest court.
Yeah. I think that's wild that, you know, in what, 2023,
right.
And
well,
2024.
This
when did that
happen?
happen?
2018, 2019. So this isn't long ago, right? That this court case happened, and they had, you know, passed an act. It's the Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act.
And that just passed?
That 5 years ago. Wow. So, I mean, this is one of those things where, you know, prior to that, you can imagine, you know, what the state of
there was
fear.
No protection in place.
There was a recent, I wish that I could tell you the name of the movie. I think it was called Darlings. Did I send it to you? I did send it to you. Darlings.
Yes.
So what's interesting is it was kind of a movie that was, you know, filmed in India. It was a Bollywood movie, and a woman who was being assaulted by her husband ends up taking, you know, just assaults him back. And it was a complete uproar. Like after that movie was, you know, released, it was, you know, the woman didn't have to do that. It's not an eye for an eye, but you know, really and truly, that's really the state of the country. That's really the state of the culture. There is that a woman who stands up for herself, who fights off a man who, you know, is raped and actually reports it and goes to court and takes him down. This is new. This is all new.
Wow,
this is very, very new, right? So I think it's ingrained in us. I think it's ingrained in us, and we take that for granted here in the West, that we have this freedom. But at the same time, I think that, you know, it's not any better. Saying
It's
these
still,
numbers are atrocious. 30% is atrocious.
And those are 30% that are reported.
Right.
Can you imagine
Only
how many
6% of cases are actually reported.
That's the thing, right? So I mean, there's so much that goes unreported. So I feel like it's very prevalent in our culture. We just feel like there are means and ways to deal with it, but maybe a lot of women, you know, aren't able to or are too ashamed to.
Yeah. And I think you should. I think you should always report it.
Yeah.
I think you should know that there are resources out there to help you.
Absolutely.
But also, you know, one of the reasons why this was such a big story, why it became a documentary and why it actually was nominated for an Oscar was because, you know, when they report it, it sets the stage for others to do so.
Yes,
So
it sets the precedent and it allows other people
to feel comfortable.
To feel comfortable.
Yeah, to feel like, hey, you know, this is wrong, right? So I think that you should always think that way. Like, this is my opportunity to change this for somebody else who could potentially get hurt as well. But our daughters.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Oh
so have you ever had the conversation with them?
I have
about
not.
Assault or possibilities or...
You know what? I feel like there's a lot. It's different. We had flashers back then.
Yeah.
I think now it's online, right? Like
online.
all this stuff is online.
These people can access you in your bedroom, and you know what I mean? Like it's a whole different level right now. I do think that there's a lot more education in the schools around this.
Yes.
I do think that there is a little bit more, whereas I don't remember ever being educated about anything like that when I was in junior school and maybe in high school, you know, health education, but it was more about yourself. It was more about your body, menstruation, that sort of thing. I don't know if they really talked about violence. I don't know if they ever really warned us. It was just something that we kind of all knew because we all experienced some level of it. I don't know. With my kids, like yours, I think I'm around them so much. I know all their friends, their friends' parents. Like we have such a
have more control.
We have such a pulse on them, right? Which can be a good thing and a bad thing. I think we were just really free range kids because I know I was taking the bus when I was 11.
Oh yeah,
I was going everywhere by myself. My parents had no idea. There's no phones. There's no way to keep track of you.
There's no tracking. I track my kids, by the way. I do.
Do you?
I do. I can see their phones. I can see where they are.
That's hilarious.
It's not about tracking them to the point where, you know, I can visually see where they are. I can see where they are located. And I'm like, you're at school. Okay, I can see you're at school.
Yes.
But that is the beauty of Apple products.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think, you know, having that conversation with your kids is really important. I haven't yet because it's such a disturbing conversation to, you know, to talk about something so, you know, it's real.
Scary.
It's real. Scary.
Yeah,
it's real because
I mean, I think they don't venture the way we did. So they have much less opportunity to just meet up on strangers and get into those situations. But, you know, I do think that it's important to talk about just understanding your personal space and boundaries with people in general, right? That's kind of where it starts. And I've had that conversation with my kids.
But it says like in Stats Canada actually reported that there was an 18% increase in sexual assaults since 2022. Ooh. This was actually a stat in 2022. So as much as you think that it's less, it's actually
increasing. Yeah.
So it's not that the number of cases that were reported by police were any higher or lower. Mm-hmm. So I think that this is a discussion we have to have with our girls. Yeah. We have to talk about it, but also with men, like men who are obviously not these creatures who would just go along with it, to be able to say, hey, this is a thing that as women we fear.
Yeah.
And we fear it for our daughters. We fear it for us. You know what I mean? We fear it because it is a thing. It's a thing that we carry.
So the interesting thing about that is when as we live with this sort of low level fear, there's sort of this extra level of hyper awareness, let's say, or hyper vigilance that we just naturally know that we have to have.
Right.
I feel like it permeates through so many other aspects of our life where we become hyper vigilant in many ways as women around other things. And I mean, the incidence of anxiety and depression is very high in women.
It is
higher than men. I don't have stats to support that, but I do know, and I have seen that, you know, for women, it is definitely higher. I think part of that comes from all of this, comes from this level of we always kind of have to be a little bit more aware of our surroundings, a little bit more aware of who do we like.
Yes.
Do you notice that when you go out, let's say, and you're alone, like you go out and see clients all the time, right? I know for me, I'm sort of always letting my family know where I am, who I'm with, how long I'm going to be out. Like I find myself sort of like reporting on stuff all the time.
I have to be careful. 100%.
Right?
I have to be careful.
Like,
Yeah.
and like I jokingly sometimes say, hey guys, like if I don't come home by this time, this is where I was last kind of thing, right? Like as a
Yes.
joke. But I actually, like we really do that, right?
I have to let my family know where I am. Specifically, like I've had random people call me, right?
Yeah,
So I have to be very careful if it's somebody I don't know.
Yeah.
But yes, it's that extra precaution that you take. I have kind of like the way that I say it is I'm street smart. You know what I mean? Like I grew up in the city. I was raised in the city. Like I said, I've seen it all.
Yep.
I have seen it all.
You've seen way too much,
Seen
way more
too
than we
much.
want to.
But because I've seen
Yes.
so much, I'm extra even uber more fearful for my kids. So that's why I'm like, where are
Yeah.
you? What are you doing? I'd constantly text them, what are you doing? Where are you? It's so important to me to have like a pulse on my kids, right?
Okay.
To know exactly what's going on because I've seen it all.
Right.
So I do have the street smarts. I'm able to handle myself in certain situations. Is there that fear like something may, get worse or something may happen to me? Of course. Like I've had people follow me home. I've had people, it's been strange. I've had stalkers. I've had like, but this was in my younger days.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I've had that happen
I've
to me
had
too,
people like who I've rejected at public places or rejected in a club and then like throw a fit and
Absolutely.
start, cussing at me and calling
Absolutely.
me the B word. So
Yep.
I've seen extra aggression from men just because they're being rejected.
Yep.
And
That's definitely happened.
it's so important for us to have this conversation with our kids because I mean, I'm over it now. I'm in like, obviously I'm settled down. I'm not that youthful anymore, but when I look at the youth, like they need to be aware that this is a thing. This does happen.
It's a
right?
possibility. It could be. Yeah.
It is.
Definitely. I don't know. I think, for me, my girls always sort of travel in packs and they're not really out alone too often. And again, they're not on public transit all that often. Once in a
Right.
while, yes. I just feel like, where's the balance? For
Right.
me, I don't always have a pulse on them. I do kind of let them go and do the thing that they want to do. I don't always check to see where they are. I have a general idea. Like if my daughter goes to the mall, then she goes to the mall with her friend. I don't always check. I mean, I drop her to the mall and I see the friend, but then they're there.
Right.
And I'm not really, I feel like I need this balance with them where I allow them to kind of go out in the world and try things and test things and meet up with people and kind of learn how to be street smart. You can't really teach street smart.
You can't
kind
really
of
teach
learn
street
it
smarts
by
in the
being-
suburbs.
Right? It's very
You
hard.
can't.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
want them to actually learn that, but the only way to do that is through experience, unfortunately.
Right.
Right? The best way to do that.
Yeah, like my daughter is 16 and she's very experienced. She's been to Toronto by herself and she's been in the city and she's taken the GO train. Honestly, she's very independent.
Good.
I'm not trying
Yeah.
to say that, but I still
Yeah.
stalk her. Like
He's a stalker.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
But it's more just, for my peace of mind to know
Right.
that she's okay. I'm sure she's going to have
Right.
experiences she'll be able to tell me about. But it's also for her to have the openness. I think having the conversation with her
Right.
is always to say, you can always come to me. You can always share your experiences because I've been there, done that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
there's anyone who would be a very good listener and be able to help you through anything that occurs to you, that would be me. So, yeah.
I agree.
100%.
Yeah, I think I have that relationship with my kids, so I kind of I leave it when they and they tell me a lot of stuff, so I just kind of assume like, all right.
Have they experienced anything weird?
No, not that I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't think I've anything like that I'm really super concerned about. They've
Okay.
had tiffs here and there and stuff maybe online.
It's online,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's online. It's
Yeah.
online. The gossip happens online. The bullying happens online. Like everything is virtual now. It's kind of weird. It's this weird thing that I don't know how to navigate, but they figure it out. It's my son that I really actually want to educate
Okay.
and sort of get him to a point. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, if I get him to learn some sort of, I don't know, self-defense, martial art, yada, yada, something like that. then I would somehow that makes me feel safer. Like I have a man in the house who would go beat up a guy if they picked on my daughter or something, right? I guess that's really old school. That's like an old school way of thinking. But
it's good. Yeah.
You know, I just my son's pretty good. Like in terms of you can't really push him around. He'll tell you to your face. He's very honest, and he's not someone who's going to get pushed around. But he's also not aggressive, right? He's not going to if he were to be rejected by a girl, he'd be like, all right, see you later, I'm next, right? Like
that's what you have to do.
He's very happy-go-lucky that way, so that's what he would do. He wouldn't react, you know, in a negative way, that I can see. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like would hope that if something were to happen and all my kids were together, my son would stand up for his sisters.
Oh, that's awesome.
Know, I would hope so. We'll see. Even though he's the youngest, but he's the tallest now. So he's the biggest now. So so we'll see. Yeah, I'm gonna let him just keep working out and like.
It's so cute.
Yeah. But I don't know. I do think it's an important conversation to have.
It is. Absolutely.
And I think it's important for men to just understand that this is a real thing. Like we really actually kind of plan our lives around some of this, right? Like we do change how we interact in the world as women because of it.
Yes.
Right? We don't just walk somewhere and we're like,
we don't walk by construction sites.
No.
We just don't.
Yeah. Not alone. Are you kidding me? You cross the street. Like there's little things.
Little things that we do, for sure.
When I feel, I can sense that there's maybe too many people or too many men and I'm alone. That's just a natural thing for me to do. Men don't do that. Men don't really have to do that. Right. So it's a little bit of a different mindset. So it's interesting that we naturally find these ways. And unfortunately for women, one of the only ways that we can kind of control situations is through manipulation, right? Like we kind of have to find ways. A part of it is traveling in groups. Part of it is
I'm not going to go there.
You know, gossip, that sort of thing.
Right.
Like it's unfortunate that some of that has played out as manipulation and gossip within the female collective because we're trying to keep ourselves safe. And that's really what it is. We're always trying to look for, can I be safe in this situation? Do I feel safe?
Yeah.
You know, in my everyday life. And a lot of women we have this low-lying sense of just not feeling safe. Right. So it comes out in different ways.
Yeah.
But I mean, back to the movie and back to the actual topic of fear. What do you think for you? What would you say to your girls right now in terms of what are some of the strategies you would give them if they're out and about?
I always tell them to be aware and to look at their surroundings and pay attention to what they are involved in. You know, what's really helped is my husband's actually helped a lot in having discussions with them about this too. Because, you know, they are going to be seeing very different things, right? Yeah. I feel like the world's gotten a little stranger, for sure. And when they do travel, specifically in the city, I don't feel that we see as much in suburbia here. But, you know, when there's a ton of people around and a ton of different situations that can come to play, I always talk about, you know, ways to avoid it. Like walk away. Yeah. Walk away from any situation that like looks dangerous, you know?
But it's so funny because I feel like when I was growing up, if you see a crowd, you're like, let's go there. Yeah. That looks like fun. And now we're telling our kids, if you see a crowd, run. Go in the opposite direction. No, stay away from people, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting what a difference it is for them versus us.
It is. And strategies for them is, you know, I always want to make sure that they know that I know where they are. Like, you know what I mean? And to always have their phone on hand, right? But yes, being conscious about themselves and their bodies and, you know, where they are in relationship to anything else.
Would you ever send them to like a self-defense class maybe?
I have tried.
Yeah. Would they?
So my younger daughter actually did Muay Thai for quite some time. Yeah. So she's pretty strong. My older one was just too dainty and too like just
not interested.
She did do some jiu-jitsu and some Muay Thai and quit that easily. But I think self-defense is definitely important.
Yeah. My girls haven't. I think I sent them to a couple of classes when they were younger and it fizzled out, right? They do other things. But yeah, I think that's probably a good thing. I think being physically fit as a woman just helps you feel a little more confident
Yes,
and a little
grounded.
bit stronger
Yes.
and grounded. And
100%.
so you give off the energy of like, don't mess with me.
Oh yeah. I always tell
Right?
them to give
Yeah,
them my
give-
number.
Yeah.
I'll take care of you, honey. Yeah.
Oh my
I
gosh,
know.
that's funny. Yeah, I do think a lot of it has to do with your own self-confidence, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm not a big person, but I have a big energy when I walk into a place and I feel like it might be a little bit sketchy. I'm like, I'm just going to walk taller. I'm going to talk really clearly to you and I'm going to look you in the eye, right?
Yes.
It's that sort of attitude of like, no, I'm not scared of you. And that's something that I sometimes just have to kind of like put on. And I think a lot of women do that too, right? It's another way of just dealing with making sure that
Yeah,
people
don't
don't
mess with me.
feel that they could take advantage of you.
Yeah.
Right. Another thing that we have to sort of learn how to do, right?
It's never
interesting.
ending.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad to have this
Yeah.
conversation. I know you didn't want to.
Yes. Oh
because
my
it's
gosh.
so-
I watched parts
negative,
of the
really.
movie and I was just like, I feel sick to my stomach. Like I just,
But we
it's so
can't
hard.
hide from reality.
can't.
We
No,
can't.
you're
The
right. You're
reality.
right.
This is a reality that is a lived experience by women throughout the world, right?
Yeah.
And throughout time. And then honestly, to prevent I guess pretend that we don't experience this here. We do. We do.
Yeah.
You don't hear it as much.
Yeah.
It's not reported as much. Like the other day, a woman was killed by her husband, like literally not too far from here.
Oh my gosh.
So these are
I didn't
things
hear
that
that
happen.
story. Oh.
Yeah, these things happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we need to be aware of these things, but also to address it from a female perspective to say, hey, men, this is what we fear. We fear
Yeah.
because it is more prevalent in women. It is more prevalent that it happens to women. I mean, it does happen to men. We're not like saying it doesn't.
Absolutely.
It's a very small percentage. I think it's like 3%,
Yeah.
of men. But I'm saying, generally speaking, we are always concerned and we are
Yes.
always aware, and we have to be alert, and we have to instill this in our daughters as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also instill in our young men to step up and like step in, say something if you see something going on.
Right.
Right. I don't know if a lot of boys are really being taught that right now. A lot of people are being sort of socialized into this, like,
Don't say anything.
don't say anything. Don't
You
get
can't.
involved.
Don't get involved.
Just
Don't poke
like,
the bear.
Walk
Just-
away. Da, da, da. But I
No.
think boys,
We need
kind
more
of-
men
we sh-
who are
we should be-
supportive
yeah,
and protective.
we should be really,
Yes.
encouraging them to stand up and say something if you
Right.
see something going wrong,
Exactly.
because another woman stepping in might not be able to really help.
Right.
Sure, they could, but I think it comes across differently when you have a man stepping in saying, hey,
Yeah.
hands off. The lady said, like,
Right.
she's not interested, like, chill out, right?
Yeah.
Even just a few words. You don't have to get involved physically, but I think it can definitely chill out a situation when a man steps in and says, guys, like, leave her
Absolutely.
alone.
Exactly.
Just something like that, right? Just to have a person to step in for you. I think it's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
I love
agree.
this. Well, thank you. I know that this was like this big resistance for me. I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to watch this movie. I'm going to cry if I watch this. But it was really, really enlightening.
It is very
Yeah.
tearful. It's
Yeah.
very sad that it's very sad that young girls that have dealt with this. It breaks my heart to know
Yeah.
this. And I just pray every day that things, obviously get better,
Yeah.
around the world
Yeah.
for women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just give our
I won't
little
cry.
piece. Yeah. We give a
Yeah.
little piece of what we can contribute.
Yes.
Yeah. To helping
100%.
people. All right. I love that. Well, thank you for
Thank you for-
talking to me
thank you
about
for
that
chatting about
today. Yeah. Don't forget, guys, we'd love to hear from you. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And we will see you next time on the Womanhood Lectures.